Hi, I'm George, W7GES, and in this video I will show you how my ham radio station is set up. This is a view from my operating position. I use three monitors. The main computer runs Windows 11 and N1MM contest logging software where I keep track of the stations I am making contacts with. The monitor for this computer is centered in front of my desk, as is its keyboard. The mouse is to the right of this keyboard on the far right of a large mouse pad. A second Windows computer runs Thetis software that controls my Anon G2 radio. I have the monitor for this computer positioned to my upper left, and the keyboard is also on the left. The mouse for this computer is on the left side of the large mouse pad. A third computer runs Debian Linux. One of the applications is Node-RED, which ties all my equipment together into one dashboard. The touchscreen monitor for this computer is to my left. Most of the time I can just reach up with my left hand and choose the antenna I wish to use for either radio, or I can rotate either antenna to another direction. The keyboard for the Debian computer is seldom used and is set at the top of my desk where I have to stand to reach it. The Debian mouse is on the left of my central N1MM keyboard and is used for selecting smaller buttons and controls in the Node-RED dashboard. I use computer mice with both my left and right hands since I'm left-handed and have had to sit at plenty of desks with mice on the right. Next, let's go through the steps I take to start up my station. The Debian Node-RED server has flows that operate my two digital wet logger web power switches. These each have 8 120 volt outlets that can be switched on or off over a network or internet connection. They connect to the network via Wi-Fi or Ethernet port. I plug my low amperage devices in directly and use a 120 volt relay to turn on the higher amperage 120 volt and 240 volt equipment. I have one flow for each power switch and leave the flows running 24/7. This way, I can start my ham shack equipment from anywhere I can connect to my network, either locally or via VPN. To start up the station, I start at the top and work my way down, turning on the equipment. First, the 50 amp power supply for the radios, followed by the 30 amp power supply that supplies the DC to operate the antenna relays, LP700 station monitor, MOAS switch, and Rig Select Pro SO2R box. Next, I turn on the Windows computer that runs Thetis, the Geocron World Clock, and the main shack computer. These are obviously already on, so I can make this video. For now, I'll leave the PGXL and Alpha 9500 amplifiers off, but I will turn on the power for the 403A Rotor Genius. The two Windows computers are set to start at power on, so next I need to start up the Node-RED flows that enable my equipment integration. I open the Node-RED editor window on a web browser and turn the station flows on in the Flow Info window. Node-RED flows connect to devices that are accessible via USB or Ethernet. Node-RED is configured with pre-built and custom modules that allow the data to be read, combined, transformed, and shared with other devices or flows. I'll describe the flows I've either created or used to operate and monitor my station. I've already talked about the top two flows for the power switches. Those are always on. Next are the SO2R flows, Anon G2, Kenwood TS890. There are 3 flows for the Alpha 9500, 2 for the data and communications aspects, and 1 that displays the UI on the Node-RED dashboard. Then I have the PGXL and Rotor Genius flows. The last 2 flows I need for SO2R are the MOAS flows for Radio 1 and Radio 2. As you may be able to see, I can click on these switches to switch the flows to enable. As I make changes in the editor, the red deploy button reminds me that flows or changes don't go into effect until I press the button and the flows are started. At this point, I turn on the 2 radios and switch to the Thetis computer. On this computer, I start Thetis and then turn on the Anon G2 radio. Next, I need to switch to the N1MM computer. The first step on this computer is to start up the Digi Anywhere USB Manager. I wanted my USB devices accessible from local and remote computers, so I purchased a Digi Anywhere 8 Plus. After connecting to the Anywhere USB, the devices are assigned to local COM ports, and ham radio programs can access the ones that don't have Ethernet. I can split the 8 ports up into as many as 8 groups. For now, I have 2 groups, but for this video, I'll connect all the ports to this computer. The COM ports in Group 1 are for the Rig Select Pro SO2R box, the N1MM phone foot switch, radio control and sound card for the TS890. Group 2 is the MOAS2 switch and the LP700 station monitor. Next, I start the MOAS2 server and open a MOAS2 configuration file. This one contains my station configuration information and how to group and control the antennas for each radio. Now the server is waiting for a client to connect. I need to switch back to the Node-RED server. Time to press the deploy button and start the Node-RED flows. Since I usually have a few flows I'm working on and may not have fully configured, I will get an error message which I can read, and in this case, the messages are just informational. After starting the flows, the dashboard displays the status of the devices. Some of the flows need other programs running to get their information. The MOAS2 server needs to be started before the client can connect, and then N1MM or Log4Old Man needs to be started before the MOAS2 client knows the radio frequency and mode for each radio. Now I'll start N1MM. It'll start with a general DX log ready for CW or phone operating. After a few seconds, N1MM will connect with the Node-RED server and the flows will start using the information. Now that they're displaying the information, we'll take a look. Here you can see we have the 40-meter antenna pointed towards Japan and the 20-meter antenna pointed towards Europe. Let's take a look at how I can operate the station. If 40 meters is open to Southeast Asia, I could call CQ on radio 1. On radio 2, I can do search and pounce on 20 meters with the bottom antenna pointing towards Europe. As the sun rises and the 40-meter action in Asia dies down, I switch radio 1 to 15 meters, and then I can swing the top antenna back towards Europe and find a spot to call CQ. On the Node-RED display, I will now have both antennas pointed at Europe and switch radio 2 to 10 meters when that opens up. If I can get down to the CW portion of the band. Now I watch the AMQ windows to see if there's any African and South American stations. If there are, I can move the bottom antenna, select it as the sole antenna, and work the station. On radio 1, I can continue to call CQ. If a weak station returns my call, I can select just the antenna pointed at Europe to see if they are there, or switch to the other one to see if they're copyable on it. I click RX first, and then choose the other antenna as I know they are copying my transmit on one of the antennas. After completing the contact, I press both in phase button to switch back to the transmit and receive on both antennas. Now that you've seen the overview, if you're interested in more detail, watch one of my other videos. Hope to see you in my log. 73. This has been George W7GES.